You've been wearing it upside down?
Probably.
Man, I ought to charge a consulting fee on this stuff.
We won't have you scrub into the OR just yet.
Yeah.
You know, I enjoy that. I have a brush at the shop and we soap up
Yeah.
for 15 minutes, like every
Wow,
30 minutes.
wow.
We have a
Walk
brush
into
that
your
we
next
get,
client.
clip our fingernails short and brush our fingers with a brush. You'd be surprised how fulfilling that is to know that you're
Yeah.
doing a good job. Yeah.
All right, I think we'll get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to our weekly press conference. This morning we have Commissioner Bob Connolly from the county, Dr. Bill Remington from the County Health Department, myself, and Superintendent David Hoffert from Warsaw Community Schools. So I've got a few things I want to talk about, and then we'll turn it over to Dr. Remington for the latest in the numbers, if you will. First thing I wanted to talk about, I've mentioned that I get on a call every week with a lot of social services discussing needs and so forth for the community, and I promised them yesterday, I think it's a good thing to just read down through a list of those providers that are on that call and the types of emergency or recovery type services that they provide. Salvation Army is helping with rental assistance. I think that's very important, as well as food assistance. Kosciuszko Community Senior Services obviously help with older adult resources. Fellowship Missions, Homeless Services, and Combined Community Services is helping with utility assistance and food assistance as well. And then, of course, Beeman Home with domestic violence issues. And I know there are a lot more, but these are the larger providers of services specifically related to the COVID pandemic that are being offered in the community and certainly will be offered indefinitely. Again, I appreciate that group getting together every week. They're trying to fill the gaps, and it's very, again, a heartfelt thank you to everything that everyone in the community is doing. But this group does a great job. Second thing I want to talk about, we're getting a few more calls about our beaches not being opened. And I'll just reinforce that we're tentatively scheduled to reopen the beaches at the beginning of the governor's fourth phase, which is June 14th. It's about 2.5 weeks from now. That's when larger public gatherings will be allowed to occur. I think the number goes from 100 up to just anything under 250 at that point. The big issue we have is trying to be able to control spacing where there's no real access points in and out. Pools have decks that you can move chairs and they're controlled how you get in and out, but a public beach is just open and there can just be swarms of people, and the social gatherings are probably the biggest challenge that we're all having to try and, for example, sporting events and that type of thing. Those are tough decisions that still are not allowed as far as spectators. And again, we're just trying to do what's best. I will add, though, we've talked about the surveillance testing that's being done. There's another group of, I think group 2 will occur, 5,000 random tests in the state of Indiana early in June. And if we get indications that the statistics are starting to drop measurably, I think we're certainly open to considering maybe reopening the beaches earlier. But again, we've talked about the importance of the numbers, and at this point, what we know is, 2.8% of the people in our county have tested positive or have antibodies by extrapolation from that random testing, and about 44% of those have no symptoms. So there can be a lot of people walking around don't know they have it, and that to me is probably the most difficult part. So we'll keep an eye on that. Hopefully we can get the beaches open earlier, but I just, at this point, we're still at June 14th. City Hall and also the Warsaw Public Buildings, the City of Warsaw Public Buildings will reopen to the public next Monday. Face coverings are recommended for residents coming into public spaces if social distancing cannot be observed. Our meeting spaces, though, we have employed social distancing, and we've got plexiglass shields. I know I was over at the county the other day, and they're all set up that way. So, you know, those precautions are here to protect both our employees and those coming into the building. But occasionally, if you get into a situation where you're closer than 6 feet to someone for a period of time, the masks are, it's highly recommended that you wear a mask that way. We will also open our public meetings to the public as the buildings open, and we may continue to have virtual meetings depending on what the public access counselor decides. I actually had a discussion with him last week, and it appears that he may recommend that virtual meetings go on for a period of time. You know, that's just an early indication that we may continue to do that. If I have council members who want to continue to participate that way, and the governor's office allows that, we will certainly continue to make that available. Obviously, we've got high quality streaming with our HD cameras and all of our microphones. The meetings are very visible and clear on our streaming, and we encourage folks to watch that way. But if you want to come to the public meetings, as our public buildings have opened up, we will reopen City Hall for the public meetings starting in June. This room gives kind of an indication. We probably got about 15, 20 seats available. If we have an issue where there are a lot of folks that come in, we could potentially stage folks. We could use our video screen in another part of the building and allow folks, again, to socially distance that way. But we will reopen that access to those meetings. I think that's important. So with that being said, I will turn it over to Dr. Bill Remington from the Kosciuszko County Health Department. Bill, I know you and your team over there continue to do a great job in giving us all guidance on answering these questions properly. So be glad to turn it over to you and talk a little bit about where we stand today.
Sure, thanks, Mayor. Our case count really jumped up in the last week. The last 2 weeks it had gone up, and I had attributed it to just a lot more testing. We're doing so much more testing now than we did 6 weeks ago, as you know. And the percentage positive, as best we could get to that number, didn't seem to really jump up until this last week. And we've got roughly almost 30 new cases since we last met. And I cannot attribute it just to the fact that we're doing a lot more testing this week. So I think we have seen a jump of cases because we're doing more things socially. And we anticipated that. Every expert you hear talk tells you this will happen when you start opening up. And I continue to hold favor to Governor Holcomb's opening up plan, and I'm not by any means suggesting we need to slow that down. But I just want to add a note of respect to what we're seeing right now. We're seeing more cases. Sure, some of these new cases are asymptomatic, and I don't perfectly have that statistic for you today. But we're seeing more clinical cases. I just yesterday in the office heard of more clinical scenarios that could be COVID-like, and I hadn't heard those for 2-3 weeks, at least in my office. So I think it is here, and it's because we're out doing more things together. So I would encourage people to try to stick to these themes you've been hearing, the social distancing, particularly with indoor settings. Try to avoid congregated, sustained indoor gatherings as much as you can. Wear a mask. Universal masking helps. Again, you don't need a mask, in my opinion, when you're out jogging or walking the dog, not in a crowd. But when you walk into a store, please mask. Hopefully the clerks are wearing masks. When you go into a clinician's office, wear a mask. They will be wearing masks, likely. If you cannot avoid a crowd in an outdoor gathering, wear a mask. We should try to prevent congregated, crowded outdoor gatherings for a while yet. I think those are general good principles to adhere to. Hand washing remains a very good thing. We touch our faces hundreds of times a day, and the virus finds entry to our airway through that, it's felt. So frequent hand washing, hand hygiene. I think it is important to, again, buffer all this with the economic crisis that's been created with this public health thing, and so it is okay to move ahead, to watch these metrics as we go. And there's still lots of ICU and ventilator capacity across the state. You can see that easily on that State Department of Health dashboard every day. We do welcome more surveillance testing. The randomized population-based study that Fairbanks and the Indiana State Department of Health will be doing a second phase here briefly. That kind of prevalence data really helps us understand this. Our prevalence, as the mayor quoted, is around 3%, just under 3%. That is not the type of prevalence that offers robust herd immunity, which is probably going to occur only post-vaccine or post a substantially greater percentage prevalence, many orders of magnitude greater than 3%. And so with this new flush of cases, I think we can say that that is true. And I've heard more talks since we last met talking about prevalence, and that 3 to 4% prevalence data seems to be mirrored in other places around the country. So it's not at 60% prevalence, it's not at 70% prevalence, we're all immune by now. It's really not that way. I so wish it was. So stay on our guard, continue to open up, and stay tuned. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Bob, any updates from the county?
Well, we're open. If you have need to go to county business, you can do that. We ask that you enter the courthouse building from the east entrance. We have Joe Mooney, our security officer. He has a sprayer that he disinfects the Justice Building and the courthouse both on a daily basis. We have Mrs. Holler. She is going around and wiping down all the flat surfaces, the doorknobs, that type of thing, the light switches. We're adhering to social distancing still. We have outside each office, we have a table, and instead of going into the office, you conduct your business at the table in the hallway. And we have marks on the floor to keep you 6 feet apart. So we're doing those things that have kind of become second nature to us. We've done them so long, it's kind of like everybody knows the procedure, and we're doing very well with that. Even the Sheriff's Department now is opening up a little more to the things they do that, like title checks, where they don't have to absolutely be done now. It's not an emergency situation, which they have always responded to, and they're still doing that in a very good way. We just still adhere to the thinking that we want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So face masking when possible if you come into the courthouse or the Justice Building, and other than that, it's pretty much status quo. We've gotten used to doing this, and we're just going to keep doing it until we don't have to anymore. So that's all for the county. Thank you.
All right, Bob, thank you. Appreciate it. I was over at the commissioners' meeting yesterday, and you're right, the courthouse looks a little different than it has in the past, and all for the right reason, I'm sure. So thank you. Yep. Well, we have a special guest today. Dr. Hofford is down in the special guest chair, and we talked a little before he walked in. I know that there's a lot of questions on folks' minds about where we stand with schools, and I'm certainly not going to preempt him. I'm going to let him have the microphone, but I'm glad we've waited a little while. It's given him maybe a little more clarity on their direction, and I'm really glad that you're here, David. Thank you for coming, and microphone's yours.
Great. Well, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of history of what's happened with the schools, what's continuing to happen, and then hopefully a little bit of what the future looks like as well inside of it. So if I take a step back all the way back to February, which seems like almost years ago now, when we started all of this, we started seeing some of the warning signs and really worked with our students on hand washing, general hygiene, what this could look like. And as we put out some of those pieces, I remember some of the original reaction was, why are we doing this? And we said, well, you know what, it's good practice. And this seems a little bit different than anything that we've dealt with before. I remember H1N1, when it came through, we talked about sneezing in your sleeve, and we put up some more hand sanitizer stations throughout our schools. But this one seemed just a little bit different in nature. And very quickly, as we got to those first couple weeks of March, we realized how different it truly was. I want to commend a lot of different groups for the quick re-engineering of what had to take place inside of our schools just almost overnight. When we look at our teachers, we look at them having to change their lessons. From day number one, we said that our schools are not closed, our physical buildings are closed, our education is not closed. And so these last 8 to 10 weeks have been a challenge, and we fully admit that. We are very fortunate as a community. Brad Hagg is with me here today. Our technology department is incredible. We ended up being one of the leaders really when we look at technology because of the community investment that we had in one-to-one. We saw a lot of school systems all throughout the state that were very quickly trying to piece technology together. We were very thankful that we did not have to do that. We've been one-to-one now for about 5 to 6 years, have really been a leader in the field. That doesn't mean that there aren't challenges that go with it, and we realize that there are still quite a few challenges with internet access, and that really is not a socioeconomic issue. It is more a rural connectivity issue, and then also a place issue here when it comes to different populations and different strains on the bandwidth that is out there. So again, a big thank you to our teachers, a big thank you to our transportation department. Very quickly, our bus drivers turned from delivering students to delivering food packages. They also went to delivering Wi-Fi. During school hours, our buses, and a lot of people did not realize this, are Wi-Fi enabled. And so we found a lot of those key areas, and during school hours, we were able to go out there and set up Wi-Fi bubbles to different communities to make sure that there was access for student work. We realized that once again, did not cover all hours of the day. We realized that it did not cover all areas. Again, there was still limited capacity that goes into it, but it was a big shift in what they were doing on a daily basis. Our food service had to change very quickly. Traditionally, inside of our schools, we are about a 50% free and reduced population. That's a number that's put together by the Department of Agriculture to signify students that needed some sort of assistance on their daily lunches that they receive through the schools. We realized that number still didn't change. In fact, in a lot of ways, it becomes harder as job situations have changed that are out there. And so quickly they moved from creating hot meals inside of schools to between our transportation and our food service, we were doing 2,800 meals. And when you times that out, each one of those meals through our pickups was 10 meals that happened throughout the week. So every Monday, we've moved to roughly about 2,300 that are picked up over at Lakeview. Those begin at 1 o'clock and usually go till 3 or 4. Again, we've changed the times around a couple times to meet the needs. So again, here lately, it's gone from 1 to 4. And then we have about 500 meals that are hand delivered to doors of students that we know do not have the access to be able to come to Lakeview and pick those up. We also have 500 boomerang backpacks that are going out, and I want to send a big thank you out to Tracy Akers, who is our head school nurse. She really developed the program, but again, we wanted to make sure that program did not stop because once again, that need is probably larger than it's ever been before. So our transportation department is dropping those off for the weekend, and those are really essential supplies that are going out to students. So again, we have about 500 of those going out on a weekly basis. Our maintenance staff has done just an incredible job going through and disinfecting our buildings. Big thank you to our parents. We know that they have taken on a new role as it goes with it, because they've taken on a role of being a teacher. I listen to my wife and I get feedback on remote learning about every day, because I have one at the high school, one at the middle school, and one at the elementary school. And so we get to see the gamut of it. So we are our parents that are going through this as well. And just a big thank you out to our community. Dr. Remington, your office with Teresa Reed has been wonderful anytime that we have had any questions. We know that there's a lot up in the air, and you know, that's some of the next steps that I can kind of talk about as we look at what some of those are. But we are just so thankful to the community resource. Mayor, your office has been wonderful, again, hosting a lot of the conversations, and I know we have a lot more that are coming up when we talk about what that reopening phase looks like. The county as well, every time that we turn around, again, this is a community that comes together. And people have asked me what's special about our community. This is it right here. Our community has come together. It's circled around the needs of our community. When we look at that, whether that is food needs, whether that is Wi-Fi needs, whether that is planning needs, whether that is childcare needs. So again, that's where we've been in the past. As we look to the future, a couple different things that are happening right now. Number one, we're using this time to really prep our buildings. When we talk about the electrostatic sprayers that you mentioned, we are going through all of our rooms, making sure that they are cleaned even on a daily basis. Even though we do not have students that are going into those rooms right now, we are taking this time to do that extra disinfectant. When we're looking at filtration systems inside of our buildings, we're taking a look and really educating our public. There are going to be a number of different videos that are going to be coming out on behalf of the school system, just sharing the prep that we are doing behind the scenes to make sure that we are fully prepared to welcome students back into our buildings and what that looks like. We're working with our building principals and we're working with our Teachers Association, saying what are the safety measures that we need to be able to put in place to make sure that we are going above and beyond when it comes to the cleanliness and when it comes to the conditions, just of simple things like how many times a day are we going to be doing hand washing with our students? Where do we set up the hand sanitizer stations so that they are at the best location for our students? Again, where are those areas that we want to make sure that the filtration systems are the top of the line? That we are going above and beyond in those situations. So that's preparation that's taking place every single day. One of the biggest questions that was out there is, what are we doing with graduation? We realized that our seniors, our class of 2020, we wanted to make sure that they are not forgotten inside of all of this. This is hard, this is difficult for them. As we've gone around and we've even had an opportunity to check in with them, you know, this looks different for them. This looks very different for them. They missed out on prom. They missed out on a lot of them that had track seasons, baseball seasons, softball seasons, the award ceremonies that they traditionally have, the rites of passage that we're used to here in this community. It's interesting that this is the 175th year of public education inside of the Warsaw community. And I don't think anybody will forget the 175th year. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to make it very special for them. While some of those activities have gone to virtual, we've made sure that we didn't drop some of those activities. We also realized that graduation is probably that biggest one, and as we polled our students, the biggest thing that they said is we want a way to be able to safely, physically come back together and close our time with Warsaw Community Schools. And so that is our goal. We realized that with the governor's orders, and we realized with just evaluating the health standards, that couldn't be done on our June 5th date that we originally had. And what that means is we had to look at an alternative way to be able to do this. So we are looking at July 17th, and we're looking at being able to do this out in the football field. Once again, we realize that this will be different. We realize that it will look different. We realize that the number of guests in attendance might look different. We realize that we don't even always know what the orders are going to be by that point. But we are committed that if it is at all possible to do, on July 17th, we are going to have an in-person graduation ceremony. If for some reason the weather is bad on July 17th, then we go to July 18th. If it's bad on the 18th, we'll go to the 19th. If it's bad after that, you know what, we'll figure out what that next weekend looks like. But we're hoping that we can find some pockets of weather in there to make that possible. The next question becomes, what about student learning? What is that going to look like? Because we have a very robust summer school program here inside of Warsaw Community Schools, one of actually the largest in the state of Indiana. We realize once again that June, that is not really an option for an in-person summer school program. The governor's orders actually keep our school facilities closed until July 1st. And so with that, we will have a secondary summer school option. So again, our secondary schools, that will be an online format in June. And then as we get to July, we have pushed our summer school back to the end of July. Right now, we are planning to be able to do that in person. Once again, there are a number of things, and I know I keep saying once again because, again, we keep reiterating over and over that we don't know what some of those circumstances will be by that point. We don't know what that social distancing will look like exactly by the end of July, but we hope to be able to bring students back together, especially at the elementary level, for the end of July, beginning of August, a summer school, and really use that as a jump start. We've been working with United Way because we realize that this will have to be a bigger summer school than we've ever had before. We have a lot of students that we're going to be playing catch up on. And we just want to be able to assess where they are at academically as we enter in the new school year, so that way we can hit the ground running. So that means that we're going to need to expand that, even though that budget from the state is not expanding. In fact, it'll probably be contracting because more schools will be looking at summer school options, and that is a pot of money that they have out there that they divide, and we really don't even know what that reimbursement rate is until later on. So United Way is looking at some ways to be able to help us with some funding and some ways to be able to do that as long as it is possible to do. The other big question that comes into play is, what about athletics? IHSAA is working with the governor's office and the Indiana Department of Education. They're supposed to be coming out with some guidance standards for all schools here in the coming weeks on what that looks like. We realize that it is hard to socially distance on a football field. We realize that is going to be a challenge. So what does that look like inside of the health standards? And what will that look like? What will that look like for our crowds that want to come see Bart Ball take place with our football team, with Bart Curtis, and after a great season that we had last year? We know that our students are excited to get back on the fields. We know that our cross-country teams, we know that our academic clubs, we just want to make sure that we are doing everything in time and we're doing it safely. Again, that's our commitment. The same thing goes for the start of school. A lot of people have said, what does the start of school look like? Right now, we are planning for the start of school to take place where we currently have it scheduled. And really, that's that second full week of August. We are preparing that is going to take place. The governor's office have said that they will come out with guidance before July 1st. The Indiana Department of Education is working with the governor's office, and we know that there are a lot of task force that are taking place at the state level with the State Department of Health, and we know that there will be a lot of communication coming up with our local Department of Health as well as we look at some of those options. It will look different. It will look different. I know there are a lot of questions out there right now. Masks, no masks, social distance, non-social distance. Those are things that we are not at the place to be able to answer yet. And a lot of those will be much higher level discussions than us making those decisions. And again, that's been a commitment from the governor's office and from the Indiana Department of Education, is they're going to try to create some universal guidelines for all Indiana schools. What we are spending our time on right now as Warsaw Community Schools are what are the things that we can control inside of it. And what we can control is our planning, our sanitation, our preparedness, working with our teachers, working with our staff, working with our technology department. What are the things that we've even learned from 2.5 months of remote learning? And how do we use what we have learned to help shape what the future looks like? So again, a lot of things that we do not know, but a lot of things that we do here at this point. And I do want to reiterate that our full plan is to open up our schools on time in August. Our plan is to welcome students back in person. Our plan is that we are moving forward. Our plan is that we do have a summer school session, but we realize that plans do have to be flexible.
Thanks. You've certainly got a lot of decision-making and understanding. Like you said, things change. I know when this whole thing started, it was changing hourly, it seemed like. At least we now have a little more time to prepare and follow these statistics, but you've got a large responsibility, and I certainly appreciate your foresight into all of this. This group I was talking about that gets together weekly of all the social services, initially they were talking about food gaps, and of course Warsaw Community Schools, Valley, Wawasee, all the school corporations in the county just rose to the top with their efforts to get meals out, and the number of meals that were being produced. It wasn't a few, as you say, it's 2,800 a day. Mm-hmm. That's an amazing reaction to, again, a rapidly changing circumstance. And I think throughout this whole thing, I agree with you. We've got a great community. Everyone's coming together. Everyone's trying to do the right thing. But that amount of food that the schools were getting out on a daily basis has probably been the thing that I'll remember for a long time, how quickly you reacted. It's phenomenal. I couldn't believe it when I heard it, but fantastic. So
it's kind of unique. You talk about your 3 children. You know, you're in the fight. I mean, you got something that you have to do. And same with my grandkids. I have 5 grandkids that are 5 years old and younger, and we were together over the weekend. And they've learned to, when they sneeze or cough, they intentionally sneeze and cough into their elbow. And to watch a 2-year-old do that, and then he says, "Papa, whoosh!" And we got a stool by the sink in the bathroom, and he pulls a little step stool up, and boy, he loves to get in there and make soap, you know. So they're learning these things early on, and that'll hold true later. You know, they'll carry that through life with them. So the little things we do now that we don't think mean a whole lot, we're setting examples, and hopefully in the future, we can cut down on this kind of disease transmission type of thing, like the types of things that Dr. Remington iterated earlier, washing our hands and sneezing, covering our masks with masks and that type of thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
thank you. So we're kind of at the question and answer period. Mr. Spalding from Ink Free. You know what? I don't think I turned that microphone on. If you would hand that to me, I will turn that on. I know if we don't have that on, some folks have difficulty hearing. Thank you. Test, test.
Test.
There you go. Thank you.
I guess my first question is for Dr. Hopper, whether you're looking at or developing a hybrid plan for the start of the school in which you would have a mix of e-learning and in-class learning. What do you think the probability of that might be?
I think that's definitely something that we are planning. Brad is here, and I might give him a couple of the hardball questions that go with it. We realize that no matter what, we're going to have some sort of hybrid. And that might not be for all students, but that might be for at-risk students. And we've already had that in past years. We have a number of students that are using swivel cameras that are live in the classroom. We've also had a number of students that, because of other health impairments, we have provided them remote learning before in the past. So taking some of those ideas, taking some of the things that we've learned, I think it is essential that we do create this, even if we hopefully never have to use it to its full extent, that we have it in our back pocket. We also have a number of programs, especially at the high school level already, that are through online learning. We do a lot of our college, even our dual credit, that is taking place through those means. So it's expanding some of those means. Brad, would you like to say anything?
You want to come up the podium, Brad?
Oh, sure.
You can stand.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, a lot of things are already in place. We have our Apex virtual curriculum that we use for credit recovery and for additional opportunities for students. So that's an incredible digital platform that every student at the high school level has a license for. And so that's always available to use to supplement in-person instruction as well as for these times when we can't physically be together. For our younger students, obviously, there is incredible specialness that happens in our classroom physically every day. And if it was best practice for us to have digital instruction, we could save a lot of money on buildings. But we all know that that is not the best learning modality, digital learning. We know that in-person really is the best for our kids. So when we look at digital options, we really want to blend as much as we can of digital solutions as well as giving students the opportunity to feel like they're part of the classroom. So Dr. Hoffert mentioned swivel cameras, and what that does is it takes a device and lets the teacher wear a pendant, and the camera tracks them as they're walking in a normal classroom providing instruction. And so really for that student who is homebound or can't be in that environment, really makes them feel like they're part of the classroom. They can ask questions. They can see what activities are happening in the classroom. Telepresence robots are also coming to the forefront, and we're investigating those options where actually from home a student can actually drive a robot through the building, interact with other students. Other students see their face on that screen and can have conversations. They can even participate in some social opportunities like recess and lunch. So really there are a lot of options out there, and it's really about providing for the needs of the many different needs of all of our folks, but also I think our ultimate quest to get back to what we know is best, which is that in-person learning, doing it safely, obviously. So.
I do want to point out, Brad is one of the leaders not only here locally, statewide, nationwide when it comes to technology, but you still heard him say that there is nothing more important than that physical contact. And when we talk about our schools, we realize that there are a lot of emotional pieces that we miss over technology. There's a lot of connectivity pieces that we miss over technology. It's a great gap filler, and it's a great when we have to hit necessity. And once again, I feel like Warsaw Community Schools was way ahead of the curve. And we're very, very thankful to be at that spot. But, you know, there still is nothing more important than having that physical interaction with students.
You know, representing the county, I might just say Tippecanoe Valley's loss is our gains.
All right.
Kind of piggybacking off of Dan's question, Dr. Hopper, as far as class sizes go, have you guys looked into seeing how those are going to be changing moving forward?
Right now, there are a lot of different calculators that are out there. And what we have tried to tell people is, if it's not on the school FAQ sheet, or it's not coming directly from your local health department or a verified CDC document, it's kind of rumor. There have been a lot of people that have created a lot of different things out there. Right now, Indiana has not put out a metric when it comes to square footage space. That's one of the things that they are looking at. That could go into some of the questions of what remote learning looks like, what some of the class sizes look like. And once again, that's all dependent on what social distancing looks like by August. What will that entail? And that might be almost a better question for Dr. Remington of what he foresees that truly looking like. And again, that might be a question that none of us quite know yet here at this point.
I agree. Hard to say. As you look at the school topic and social distancing, masking, hand washing, you quickly, if you spend any moment thinking about this, you're struck with recalling what it was like to be a teen, maybe a young child, and the pragmatics of all this. It's just like, oh my goodness, how are you going to do this? Square footage alone, all right, you have 50% of the kids in the classroom. What about the other 50%? Where are they going to go? So we we may be at a let her rip kind of a motif for the schools. They're not our highest risk population. That's the grace. Now, some of those kids are going home to multi-generational homes. I know that. And we need to protect the elderly. I can see that into the fall. But for the schools, it may be along a let her rip motif because you're struck so much by these pragmatics. How do you pull this off? Or a hybrid, like you say, with technology. So the best answer is I don't really know.
Yeah.
But I do hear a lot of really great voices saying how essential it is that schools start in the fall. And I, as a public health guy who's a bit in the weeds on this topic, I'm all for it.
You talk about the
Don't change your plan.
Yeah, you talk about the pragmatics of the thing. How many school buses, do you happen to know off the top of your head how many school buses we have in the system?
We have about 65 that are running daily routes.
65, and I talked to a bus driver the other day, he did some simple math in his head quickly, and he said to run his route and pick up all his kids, one 66-passenger school bus, he'd have to run the same route 4 times. And that's physically and economically not feasible.
Impossible.
Yeah.
Impossible.
You just get them to school, and you have to turn around and take them back home. So, our hat's off to you guys and what you have to do, and especially that transportation department. That's just untenable. It's crazy.
And it goes back to some of the things that we said, that what are the things that we can control and what are the things that we can't control.
Exactly.
The things that we can control are the sanitation pieces. The things that we can control are hand washing. The things that we can control are spacing out as far as we can inside of our areas. There are still so many of those other things that like you're saying, that we can't control. I know President Trump made a statement here a couple weeks ago and received almost the same type of question. And one of the things that he said that he worried about more than the children was the at-risk population of some of the employees. And that's another area that we're really working on, because we realize that how do we make sure that this is safe for our employees? We have about 1,500 employees inside of Warsaw Community Schools, third largest employer in Kosciuszko County. And so what are some of the standards that we need to create for them to be safe to come into the workplace?
All right, Mr. Sloan?
Dr. Remington, I saw a post the other day that indicated that Kosciuszko County was not actually at its peak yet. Have we reached our peak yet, or are we close? Or where are we at?
So we don't know. We don't really know the number of cases historically. Quite frankly, we're in a different paradigm of testing altogether now. So our cases are highest now, week by week, if not because of just a surge of cases, just a lot more testing. So that's a great question. It's really been hard to get at exactly where the surge has been. As a clinician, and some tie-in with the frontline forces, if you will, of our small community, I really felt there was more pressure at the front lines 6 weeks ago. We'll see where this latest surge is going over the next few days. The model that I've mentioned a couple different times, a simple fit-the-curve model that came from experts downstate for our county, puts us past the peak now. But no, that it was a simple fit-the-curve model, and who knows if it'll play out or not.
With it being summer, I mean, a lot of people think, like the flu kind of goes away this summer. What are the chances of this going away for the summer? Or is it not really a seasonal thing?
Yeah, another great question. Many people asking this. Is there going to be a seasonal nature to this latest coronavirus? And nobody knows. Influenza is highly seasonal. It breaks those rules when it's novel, as it did in 2009. If you look at that flu curve, which still lingers on the CDC website, it's a weird curve. That one falls out from all the other years that we've tracked recently. And that was the first year a novel pathogen comes out of its non-human reservoir. It breaks all the rules. And then it settles in, at least with influenza, into a seasonal nature. Whether coronavirus does that, I don't know.
All right.
Dr. Remington, do we know, I know at the county level, near as I know, we've had like nearly 40 people who have totally recovered from being tested or from being actually infected. I know that number on the front end keeps going up, but what about the ones that have recovered? Do we have any information on that?
I have had that statistic on previous weeks. I don't have it today. But that's an imperfect number to get to, and of course it's so dependent on those that came to a confirmed diagnosis, which, because of the testing, has been problematic. There are lots of recovered cases out there, lots of them.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Spalding.
Yeah, Dr. Hopper, there's a lot of doomsday scenarios for public schools in terms of finances. NPR was looking at a range of loss of funding from 15 to maybe 25% as much. So I'm wondering what the school, are you planning for that? And also, the second question, how concerned are you that teachers aren't going to want to return to school?
Yes and yes. The reality is, with the way that Indiana public education is funded, it's funded through income taxes and sales revenue. So, and that's the money that goes straight into the classroom. Our property taxes go towards the operational standpoint of it. So we are very concerned. As we look towards the future, we realize that this is an economic crisis that is affecting everybody, and so to think that it will not impact our schools would be naive on our standpoint. We are preparing to do more with less is the term that we've started using around my office. We put a lot of freezes on budget lines. We put some freezes on hiring. We realize that we don't know what this will completely look like as it materializes, but I can say absolutely we are concerned about what that will do to education funding. The second part, I know I read a USA Today article that said 1 in 5 teachers are concerned about coming back to the workplace, and it goes really into that at-risk population. We have a number of teachers that would definitely fall in those at-risk populations, whether that's health or whether that's other circumstances inside of their life. It is definitely a concern that we have. I would say that Warsaw is a little bit different than if somebody was teaching in New York City. So I think that 1 in 5 is definitely a statistic that probably does not follow Warsaw Community Schools, but yet at the same time, if we even have 5 teachers, 10 teachers that have health concerns and are unable to return because of those health concerns, there's a teacher shortage all throughout America right now that does bring a concern for a lot of our classes. And how do we accommodate with those teachers? That's something that we're working through right now, and we're working with our Teachers Association to see what that could look like. That goes into some of the remote learning questions that we have. So that's something that we're going to be weeding through this summer to make sure that we are fully staffed, but then again, going back to our budgets as well, making sure that we are being very, very cautious in our hiring and our spending and preparing for what that could look like down the road.
And Dr. Hopper, I was talking to a couple of parents recently, and their concern was their student did the e-learning, but I don't think their student retained it. It's kind of like they do move on. So if the school year starts back up in August, how do you deal with the lack of retaining that information?
Yeah, that's another great question, and you all are hitting on some of the big hurdles that we have, because from the moment that school shut down, and we'll always remember Friday the 13th as our last day of physical in-person in 2020, so it's only fitting that it was Friday the 13th. We realized that there are going to be learning gaps. We realized that students are going to come back in a wide array of the spectrum. of where they were at. You know, sometimes that some students learn better in a physical setting. That might be what is the parent help? I mean, I had some parents joke around with me. They said, I looked at my kids' math homework and thought that they were in calculus and they were really in pre-algebra, but I had completely forgotten how to even help them out with pre-algebra. So there's a wide array of where students are going to be. It's why that summer school is going to be so critically important, that if we can get that jump start to the school year, especially at the elementary level when it comes to that foundational literacy skills. We realize that information is going to be so critically important to helping jumpstart our students back into the school setting and back into the school year. So we're going to push for that as much as we possibly can, no matter what that looks like. That's going to be critical inside of it. The other part that we realize, and this is going to be nationwide, learning maps are going to look different than they looked going into this last school year. State standards are going to look different. We hope that standardized testing will look different. So we're going to be doing a lot of diagnostics as we enter this school year. We're going to be figuring out where students are going to be at. We're going to be looking at more of almost an individual learning plan for every student. To say, okay, what are the gaps that need to be covered? If a student was in geometry, their normal course of action would be that they jump into Algebra 2. But you know, Algebra 2 for the first 6-7 weeks might be taking a look back at geometry and saying, what did we miss inside of it? How do we catch students up? We realize that this will impact everything from ACT to SAT, and this is nationwide. This is nationwide. Everybody's going to be dealing with this. I believe that where our students were at with the learning, our students will actually come out ahead of their peers. But yet that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a deficit of where they would be if this was a year ago right now.
If I may, what percentage of students would you like to see in this summer school session?
That's a wonderful, wonderful question as well. As many as we can possibly get in there, I think is the best answer to give. We've asked our principals to really work with the teachers and say, what students do you see from what you were able to notice from the remote learning? What students were able to complete things? Where do you see where the learning gaps were at? And the more that we can personally invite those students to be at our summer school, the better. So we are looking, it will be, if all goes in person, we're able to get the physically back, I see it being the largest summer school that we've ever had before.
Do you have a percentage idea?
Ooh, not yet. Not yet. I can tell you right now that we have one of the largest summer schools in the state of Indiana, just on a traditional basis. So I would see those students, and then I would see us definitely adding to that number as well.
Looking ahead at the fall semester, you've seen universities come out saying they're going to skip certain breaks to end the year by Thanksgiving, take an extended winter break through December and start back up in January. Are you guys juggling with an idea similar to what colleges and universities are doing as far as the fall semester goes?
I think we can learn a lot from the colleges. It's been interesting to watch, especially Purdue. And Purdue nationwide has gotten a lot of credit with Mitch Daniels and the way that they have reconstructed a lot of their traditional college. You would take a look at. Colleges have a different challenge that K through 12 does not have. We do not board students. So that's one of the reasons, especially Purdue, especially as they're looking at their international students and some of the extended travel that goes on. You think about even their sports teams are traveling all throughout the nation. We're relatively localized. And so that puts us in a little bit of a different quandary that is out there. There seem to be two different waves of thoughts, actually three. The third is that we stay traditional on just our normal calendar where we start in the middle of August and then we keep moving. The two other thought processes that are out there, and it seems like a tug of war, start after Labor Day. And that is to be able to give a little bit more time for things to clear out. The other is start as quick as you possibly can and actually start in July and look at a more year-round calendar. Right now, where we are looking at is we're looking at staying the same where we're at in August. Once again, that could be something that would change from additional guidance that is out there. but it doesn't seem, you're kind of taking a risk either way that you go inside of that, because you hear the people that say start after Labor Day, but then what happens if there is a second surge that comes in with it? If we're saying we're going to completely flip-flop the schedule and start earlier than we've ever started before, then we are disrupting a lot of the summer plans, and we're disrupting even being able to get that summer school start that is in there. So right now we are still looking at our traditional calendar that we have, but realizing that again could change if there was something unforeseen out there. Dr. Remington, would you like to add anything about the calendar aspect? Because I know there are a lot of
I've heard that
questions.
discussion a little bit. I'm not as studied as certainly you are. I think of pulling the string on school attendance as being a disease mitigating step. So, I mean, it's here, the beast is showing itself around, and you're just not getting anywhere and settling it down with traditional means. You've got to cut the legs out from under it, and one of the ways you do that is close the schools. And that was a tough decision back in March, you know. Were we seeing enough to make that decision? And the communities wrestled with that. It was a really tough one. So if you're at that place in October or November and disease transmission is high and you're seeing scary scenarios in our front lines and you're not getting at it with the traditional verbiage, then you turn to these heavy levers of public health again and say, okay, I guess we need to cut the legs out of the beast, you know, or cut its fuel supply off and close the schools. That'll come hard because there have been so many lessons learned of the downside of pulling these heavy levers over the last 2 months, right? I mean, what a lesson for all of us. So I don't see people going there quickly, honestly. It would have to be just a real wildfire in the community I think, to pull that lever.
Gentlemen, any more questions from the press? All right, thank you. Dr. Hoffert, appreciate your insights. I know you're doing a very good job, but boy, that's a lot of different aspects to consider. And Bob bringing up the transportation, something I hadn't even thought about was bus transportation. And I'm sure the food service is going to look a little bit different and the whole works. So thanks again. Mr. Connolly, thank you for the county's perception. I know we continue on. We're trying to do what's best. It's a juggling act. And, I know we all try and do our best. It's an imperfect science, unfortunately, with a disease that is still evolving, quite frankly. So I'm not going to ask you the inning question this week. You know what? Because I know you're going to tell me that we're still maybe in the 8th or 9th, and you might have backtracked a little, or we're going to play a doubleheader. So go ahead.
Correct.
All right, thanks. All right, we'll see you all next Wednesday, and thank you so much for your participation, and see you next week.
Thank you.
I don't know. I lost track.